Alright guys, you saw the title of the mouse video. In this video, in chess, I'm going to be reviewing a 200 elo game. And to be honest, it's not the worst game I've ever seen, but it's still very bad. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and sub, because that would really help the channel a ton. If you really enjoyed this video, you can also drop super thanks. And if it's difficult to hear my voice, just turn on captions. Without further ado, let's just begin. So, in this game, we have one player from Brazil, another player from Germany. And the ratings are 253 and 260, so it's a 200 elo game pretty much. Medium 200 elo game. So obviously it's not going to be very good, but okay, we'll see. So the game starts off with pawn to e4. Black responds with pawn to e5. So far, a normal game, although always we've seen that, yes, the opening is generally normal, but the game becomes very bad very quick. The pawn, well no, not the pawn, the knight over here develops to f3. So far, it's good. But the knight over here develops to f6. Now the reason this isn't a good move is because what white can do is that they can take, which actually does happen, and if black takes back, which actually does happen as well, the queen can come over here. Now you might think, this doesn't do much. But the problem is that you need to actually protect the knight with a move like pawn to d5, because if you don't do this, as you can see, the evaluation bar is already in favor of white by like 1.5 points, because the knight is being attacked. And probably because the pawn might be like, you can probably attack it with something like this, and there's not really much black can do about it. But if you don't find this move, and the knight just runs away, you literally lose your queen, because the knight can just go over here, and the queen or the bishop can block, and either way, the knight captures, and you just lose your queen, and you're in a totally losing position. But come on, this is a 200 elo game, obviously that doesn't happen. So instead what happens is that this knight develops over here. Probably the idea is like trade and just open up the queen, that's probably the idea. But black actually doesn't trade, and what happens is that this knight captures this knight, and this knight captures that knight. Okay. Then we have pawn to f4. The reason it's not a good move is because it allows for this check, and the king will be forced to move. Well, I mean, no, the king can technically go over here, although the knight can come over here, and generally things could just get bad. Like, I know the queen can capture, but maybe you could like open a pawn over here, and bishop arrives, and then things just get really bad. But what happens instead is pawn to f5. So like, if the pawn gets captured over here, not the pawn, if the knight gets captured over here, the knight gets captured over there, which is a sort of reasonable move, okay. So the knight gets captured, and the other knight also gets captured. Then we have pawn to d3. The idea probably, if takes, bishop gets developed. That's probably the idea, but that doesn't happen. Instead, pawn to d6. Now what you should do is probably just capture it, if I'm being honest. And that doesn't happen. Instead, this pawn captures. And now it's losing. I think the reason is because this check can happen, and then if you block, this is what happens. And yeah, generally it's just not good, because like you'll have to like deflect, and even then you can just do this. They're forced to take, and then you capture back, and now you're just winning by a pawn. But okay, so they capture back, and now white is actually winning, because it's the exact same thing. You should not trade the queen. You should actually go over here, and then when they defend, you take this pawn. Then when they block, that's when you should capture. That's actually like white's winning. But instead, we have pawn to h4, which accomplishes nothing, to be honest, but okay. And then we have pawn to h5, which also accomplishes nothing, but okay. And white actually decides to trade the queens. And even though like they didn't win a pawn, the reason it's still winning is because now black literally can't castle. So the king has to take, obviously. And the rook is developed, which this literally just blunders the rook in one move. But obviously that isn't found, and instead we also have the rook moving over here. So now you can capture this rook for free, but obviously that doesn't happen. The rook just goes over here. Like, it's still winning for white, because this is still a possibility. But obviously they're not going to find it. If they didn't find it in the first move, definitely they're not going to find it. The rook goes to h7 to defend, obviously. Rook goes over here, and now it's a draw. I think the reason is because the position is basically equal. That's probably the main reason. And the rook goes to h6. I think the reason it's losing is because you can take the pawn over here, which reveals an attack on the rook, and you're already like kind of just trapping the king, and they can bring the other rook, and then things will get really bad really quick. And yes, the rook does no, the rook doesn't get captured. That's what I was going to say. I mean, the pawn gets captured. Sorry, guys. Then the rook over here goes to d6. And the reason this is not a good move, probably, is because, like, you can probably do something like this. And now, if the king tries to run away, you can probably still win the rook somehow, like, maybe, like, I don't know. There's probably some move. I mean, that's probably why the evaluation bar is so high. But instead, the pawn gets captured, which is still a very good move. Then the rook attacks this pawn over here. And, okay, like, it's not a terrible move. But still, the pawn could just be defended very easily with bishop to d3. But obviously it doesn't happen. Instead, we have rook takes on h8. The idea is that if the pawn gets captured, the bishop will get captured. And that's actually what happens. And now black is really losing the game. So they make their king run away. The rook moves. The king tries to defend. The rook takes. And to be honest, I don't know why they did this. By the way, guys, a really quick tip in chess. Even if you're above in material, do not sacrifice a piece for no reason, because who knows, that piece might actually be useful later on. Like, sacrificing the rook for the bishop, probably the idea that white had was that I'm already up by so much material that I shouldn't really care and I should just get the game, like, going quicker. That was probably their idea, but still, you should never do this. But it happens. Okay. So the pawn moves. I have no idea what this accomplishes, but okay. The rook moves. And now, it loses the rook with check because of the bishop. And guess what? White actually finds it. So the king has to move. The king goes back to e8. And now the pawn moves. And to be honest, I think the plan, if pawn captures, bishop gets developed, they can bring the rook. And then you can probably go for a checkmate somewhere. So the pawn captures, and instead the bishop doesn't even bother to capture the pawn. Okay. The pawn gets moved to h5. This pawn moves, the e-pawn. Black pushes a pawn. White brings back their bishop, obviously to attack this pawn. We have rook to c7, which doesn't really do anything. And yes, white actually does capture the pawn, thankfully. So black runs away. And now white is pushing their pawn. So far, this 200 elo game, it's not terrible. Like, it's not a 100 elo game, but, like, still many blunders, not many good moves. But okay, we've seen worse. Now, king to e6, the pawn still goes, and black doesn't even capture the pawn, but okay. The pawn keeps going, black finally captures the pawn. They bring their bishop. White, I don't know why they did this, but okay. Now the king moves. White brings their rook. And then white just moves their king. I don't know why, because, well, I mean, it could be subject to a check, and then you'd have to move it back, but okay. But black just retreats their king. This is not what you should do in an endgame, but I mean, at this point, yeah, it's totally lost for black, guaranteed. The king moves, like, continuously, and the rook comes over here, and now the pawn is literally unstoppable, because it is going to promote no matter what. The pawn keeps going, and white actually saves their bishop. The king goes to c2, probably just to capture these pawns, and now it's mate in 15. Checkmate is actually on the board now. The pawn promotes, and yeah, black is forced to take, white takes back, and now black is down by 10 points of material, and their king, yeah, it's not in a good situation. Well, they capture a pawn, because what else are they going to do? They get a check, the king runs away, and now probably white is just going to go for their pawns. Black captures their pawn, and look, guys, oh, I was going to say there was a glimmer of hope because I saw, like, a small hope on the evaluation bar, but never mind. Now it's mate in 6, now it's mate in 9, now it's mate in 5, mate in 4, mate in 5. Yeah, guys, so as you can see, multiple different checkmate patterns. And checkmating with a rook and 2 bishops on different squares, this should be very easy, but this is 200 elo, so what are we expecting? The king moves, now it's mate in 4 still, now it's mate in 3, now it's mate in 2, literally. Because, I mean, you could probably play something like this. Well, I'm not really sure what the move is. No, that's not what you do. What is the move? Maybe like this. Maybe you can go like... Honestly, I'm not really sure exactly, but there's definitely a move somewhere. But instead of that happening, rook to b7 happens. But still, mate in 2. Like, the king can't really do much. Because now, just go over here. Well, apparently no. Look, I have no idea what the move is. Maybe like this. I'm honestly not sure, okay? But instead, the king goes to d1. The rook gives a check. The king runs away. The bishop gives a check. And instead of the game leading to checkmate, like all good games, the game ends in a stalemate. A draw. I honestly have no words. Like, what did we just watch? Okay. A normal opening, which had a chance to end very bad for black, but that didn't happen obviously because this is 200 elo. And then we saw potential strategies and some trades, but also a lot of blunders, like multiple blunders in this game. And then eventually it just became like a totally winning position for white. And, you know, the pawn promoted. And then things just got really bad for black because they lost their only piece remaining on the board. And then all white had to do was checkmate with 2 bishops on different squares and a rook. And instead of that happening, they got greedy and took all the pawns. And they accidentally stalemated. What did we just watch? Like, actually, this was just total chaos. Although, to be fair, I think there are 200 elo games that are far worse than this, so this is still not like the worst 200 elo game ever, but it's definitely extremely chaotic. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and a sub, as I would really help the channel a ton. If you really enjoyed this video, you can also drop a like and a sub, and you can also drop super thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!